Hi guys, so we have Dhruv Dewan with us, and let's get into our conversation with him and know about his journey.
Thanks, Iloni. Thanks for having me here. So, quick background. I am in my entrepreneurship journey with my second product. A lot of mistakes with the first. Still figuring out how we can sort of set those mistakes in a second time round. A lot of challenges, but in terms of the overall world. We've been safe through COVID. We've been growing in terms of the company, so can't complain, and hopefully moving towards a more sort of positive side of growth.
Yeah, that's awesome. If we had to take a step back, what was your first venture? Like, what was it called, and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I think this is in 2015. I had spent about a little more than 2.5 years working at a corporate job. I still remember I was in Calcutta for a long project, and I had some time on me, and that's when I was in that phase in terms of what's next for me. I was about, I think, 24, 25 at that point, and felt I need to I can take on bigger challenges, bigger risks. And I had that appetite at the moment, right? So I think that's when the seed was sown, as I think a lot of young professional or students, there's always an option to kind of study further at that point, or you start something, there's an investment. I mean, so I was going through that phase, and I think that's when I met one of my co-founders. His name is Krishi. He was in the US at that time. He had returned to India, and he'd coincidentally joined my team. And when we started conversing, we felt like we were on the same wavelength, and we felt it's time to kind of move on to the next thing. And that's when we started ideating. Both of us came from a very hustle sort of attitude, with more focus on scale, less focus on quality. And that was just our mindset to grow big too fast. So we felt we needed some balance. Coincidentally, we had a common friend between us. He was at that point with Teach for India, doing a curriculum there. And when we reached out to him, we felt that he would be a great third partner. And that's when I think our journey sort of started in terms of what we'll do. To be honest, I don't know how, but we zeroed down on loyalty. I think there was a lot of conversation around payments, around offline retail, around how to make India, SMB India, more internet ready. And I think we had to pick a touch point, and that's when we started with loyalty. The product was called HashtagLoyalty. The idea was to kind of empower small, medium businesses in terms of help them run loyalty programs and build a two-sided business, help consumers manage their loyalty programs, etc. That's how we had started. I think it was on very modest terms. I still remember we had pooled in a few lakh rupees each, and bought in some infrastructure, set up a website, and just got going, right? We decided we'll do sales, and that's when our sort of journey started. So it was a long, I would say it was a long journey, because HashtagLoyalty existed till early last year. And then we pivoted the product. It wasn't literally a shutdown, but we pivoted the product. But lots of ups and downs, I think, those 5 years. I can share more as we go on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I still remember, or probably I have it in my wallet back in India, that orange color HashtagLoyalty card. And I remember using it so much in the EY campus. Like, we had the D Bella downstairs, and I think they used to avail that. And I think all of us have, like, most EY people ended up having one. So yeah. I think it was a great product, but
it was a great product. But I mean, if I have to look at what I did 5 years back, I would never do that product. We build. We had fixed assets like cards, tablets from day one. We had a two-sided product. We focus on consumer, focus on business. We made so many mistakes. I mean, the naive me We were very naive, right? I mean, first business is always difficult, and there was not much around in terms of mentoring or learning from peers. The background we came from, at that point, it was just set out and get started, and then we'll figure it out. So not always the best approach. So, but yeah. So that's about that.
Absolutely. But if you had to tell us a little more about the business model of like HashtagLoyalty, and probably where did you feel the gaps were at that point? How would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, to be honest, when we started, right, the idea was we couldn't choose whether we should be focused on retailers, restaurants, the audience that we were building for, or the end consumer. And we looked at a lot of replicas in India and outside in terms of what's happening. And that's how we zeroed down, okay, we'll have a product where we'll give technology to the retailer and we make it convenient for the end consumer. Let's marry both, and that's a successful product, right? On paper, it sounded easier than it was. The idea was there were challenges on both sides. Initially, when we started, we felt that we'll charge revenue only to the retailer and generate revenue from businesses. So that's how we started. There was a lot of consumer investment, like the cards, the tablets, from stands, locks. I mean, there was just so many things because beverage is a reality in India, and the idea was that's how we sort of started. And soon we realized that our core audience is the retailer. So we started to slowly shut down the consumer side of our business and focus purely as a SaaS product. That's when even I was learning there is something called a SaaS product, right? I mean, the idea is how do you set it up? How do you charge? How does it work? And that's when we found our sort of niche. And HashtagLoyalty 2.0 at that point was drop consumer, move and be a SaaS product. We had to think bigger than loyalty. So the next step for us was like a CRM. And the idea was we provide a customer relationship management tool for the businesses we work with. So I think that was sometime in 2017. It took us about, I think, a year to year and a half to kind of figure this out. And then new challenges arose, right? So we were lucky. We got incubated at that point, end of 2017. It gave us a boost. We raised a small seed, and then we could sort of get started actually building the product without worrying about our rentals, our inventory, etc. Right? So that's how the journey started. 2018 for us was a first sort of step where we were able to successfully launch a full-fledged SaaS product. We started working with larger brands in India, and from then the business sort of grew. So that 18 to 20 was a good phase for us. Those 2.5 years in terms of HashtagLoyalty.
Got it. Even being a first-time entrepreneur, this is one challenge that I always faced: figuring out what is the right financial model. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you always kind of go about, okay, you're going to do this, or this is how your operations are going to look like, or the kind of team that you want. But identifying what is it that gets you through the market or gets you through the door, how did you guys evaluate that? Because looking at F&B in India, it's a very low I mean, depends on the brand to brand, but it's a pretty low margin business. Like even when I look at marketing, they have way low budgets than any other retail segment would. So how were you all able to set that up?
Yeah, no, super challenging. I think there was a point in somewhere around 2019 where our payment collections team was as big as my sales team, right? And that's a sign that things are not right in terms of how it's going to operate. I think two things happened. One is there is a SaaS accelerator in India by the name of OKR. We joined that community early 2020. This is in Jan 2020. It's run by Prasanna. He used to run the Microsoft incubator. Rajan, who's a sort of veteran in the SaaS space, and Shekhar. So the idea was we aligned ourselves with them. I think 2020, I still remember we were in Bangalore. at their office, and we spent about a week unlearning what we've done for the last 4 years in terms of financials, how we operate, everything, right? Everything, literally everything. It was a SaaS 101 session in terms of how to build a company with recurring revenue, right? So I think that was something which is a big eye opener for us. We felt we're doing relatively well till we went there, right? And then I still remember we were 9 other startups that were part of that cohort, and we all realized what the hell is happening, right? And prior to that, we did a pre-series round, so we were able to get in some investor money. We were able to scale, so we felt things are looking good, right? Till we reached Bangalore, right? That trip made me realize we're building crap. We're not doing a good job, right? That 1 week was extremely helpful. I think it kind of helped set a lot of benchmarks in my head in terms of what should be simple things, right? In terms of your client to revenue ratio, how big should the market be, who should you sell to, how much to charge, how to position your product, and most importantly, they've coined this term called value SaaS, which means you don't charge a customer based on what you think is the fee, on how much value you are adding or revenue you are saving or adding, right? So the entire methodology changed, right? And luckily, all three of us attended. We would usually go differently for sessions, but I think they pushed all three of us to kind of come in. It was a big deal that time, right? Leaving work for 10 days, and nobody sort of back home. So, but that was really good, and that happened in Jan 2020, and then in March, as you know, sort of COVID happened. So we were sort of like, we planned so much how we're going to change the company. At that point, we were going to we were setting up a Delaware. We were going to sell in the US. We were going to completely pivot out of the Indian market, and there was so much going on, right? I mean, in our heads. And then sort of COVID happened. So back to the drawing board, but it gave us an opportunity to kind of correct all our mistakes. So, and that's how then a new product was born.
So much to unpack there. By the way, I love the name #Loyalty. So like SaaS, right? Let's talk about that. I think you went through that SaaS phase right when like SaaS companies were becoming very popular. I don't think there was any infrastructure post like 2016, whenever you guys started, right, for the SaaS. Like, how would you even collect the payments, right? There was no Stripe, or at least at this scale. So, and all the UPI and all the different payment system infrastructure that's got set up. But so speaking about SaaS, like what do you think are like the top 5 metrics that any founder who wants to start maybe like a SaaS company should focus on?
Yeah, I think super question, right? I mean, I think 2016 there were guys, in fact, like Freshdesk, Soho, Chargebee, Capillary. They were kind of setting the tone in terms of how to structure revenue, what parameters to look at, but it was still very early. There was not enough information out there, etc. And that's one of the reason why Opeka, this accelerator, was set up, right? They by the way, funded by Chargebee, Freshdesk, all leading SaaS companies globally, right? So the idea is they identified this problem. So it was an unknown sort of area for us, right? When we heard the term SaaS, it was more in terms of what it means, but we didn't know in terms of how to operate a SaaS company, right? So I think for us, when we were as part of SaaS 101, right, the first sort of session that we had in terms of parameter, right? We call it the ICP. So who is your ideal customer profile, right? And the idea was we had about 5 or 6 questions to kind of actually write it down individually as founders, and the remaining 8 startups would write it for your product as well, right? So the idea is you would understand who your ICP is. That's a term that is stuck with me so strongly anytime I talk to any of my team members, sales, marketing, product, right? My first question is, are you building for our customers? Are you building for potential customers or people I don't know that may not exist, right? So ICP is one, knowing who your customers. Second, I think we use this term quite often, but to get a PMF, which is a product market fit, is critical in terms of any SaaS product, right? When do you have a PMF, at least in SaaS term? When you got in this is how we were looking at it. When you got certain number of inquiries that convert to sales without you talking to them, right? And they're paying you the fee that you have sort of judge, right? So getting that PMF is difficult. Sometimes people take a month, and we've seen people take decades to kind of get that actual fit. And that's when the business is in autopilot, right? SaaS is an autopilot business. You set up a website, you want people to come sign up, and you want them to keep using the product, right? So PMF is key. I think third is value-based pricing. The idea is, I'll give you an example. If my product helps a certain business save 30% of costs, I will not charge them $50 because that's my fee plus maybe a 30% margin, right? I will charge them $500 because that's the value that I'm adding to their business, right? We see a time where in probably in 10, 12 years, value-based pricing will be a commodity. So the entire industry will be charging that way. And that's how the industry will grow. But it's still sort of some time away, right? But that's key in terms of brands, right? I think fourth, and this is more understanding your churn and who your actual users are, right? SaaS uses a term called MRR, which is your monthly revenue run rate. The idea is to know that, right? Because someone may pay you 12 months in advance, but it's key to kind of understand, if everyone were to pay you monthly, right? What would your revenue be? And on that basis, are you growing? Which means that, are you adding more clients than what you churn out, right? So I think these are broadly some of the things. Fifth, I think geography is super key in SaaS. You can make in fact, I'll give you an example. There's this, I was just reading about it today. Part of my earlier batch, there's this product called Gym Books. Yash Agarwal, he's based out of Raipur. Entire team is out of Raipur. Just stays around through Y Combinator, selling fintech products globally, right? So the idea is, geography is so important, and the idea is to focus on highest paying markets. Is key, especially for entrepreneurs that come from different backgrounds, right? We have the advantage of cost. So I think geography is key. I think somebody who gets these 5 relatively right will do better than the others.
Got it. I think especially when it comes to geography, I think Zoho did a brilliant job. I mean, the way they launched and scaled in the US, there is no product that kind of even meets that pricing. Like everything is probably $100 up from where their pricing is. And I think it's just a no-brainer for somebody who's starting out or an MSME.
Yeah, true. And the trick is, in India, they didn't, at least in their early years, they didn't charge like what maybe a Tally would charge for a billing system, right? They still said that, okay, we will charge you 20% less than what global products charge you. But we will give you that interface. We will give you those APIs. We'll give you these integrations. And the idea is you will do more with that product, right? So that was the sort of difference, even when they're focusing on businesses in India, which kind of happened late in their journey. Earlier on, they were only focusing on brands outside of India in terms of sales. But yeah, geography is super important. So I think we missed the bus in with #loyalty. We were stuck in India. We could have built the same product in another geography sitting here. But again, I think a lot of advantages, got to learn so much about the industry. And that's something that I'm sort of putting into the second product, right?
Wow, that's awesome.
Talking about the second product, like when did you decide to launch Thrive, and do you want to speak about Thrive?
Sure. So I think March 2020, we realized we are screwed, right? I mean, HashtagLoyalty focused on offline retail. We started getting mails from customers saying that, hey, please pause our subscription, we're shutting down. And we were at that time, I think we were looking at about 5 to 6 months runway. And we were sort of going in for our Series A, and nobody was going to fund at that point, right? So the idea was it was getting very murky. So I think Thrive for us was a necessity. We had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do we add value to our current set of merchants. What we had was merchant data, guys we worked with, customer data. The idea was to kind of build a product that solves a serious problem. Soon we realized, right, early April, we also give a CRM, right? So most of the campaigns that the brands were running were, hey, order from me on an online aggregator, Zomato, Swiggy, your DoorDash, Deliveroo for respective market equivalents, right? The idea was there was a lot of communication going out, right? So we felt there is place to kind of launch a product in that genre because we already had clients. And that's when the sort of thought process started, right? We felt that's a big product. It'll take us some time. We need to do something in the interim. So we ran a campaign called SaveLocal.in. SaveLocal.in was buy gift cards from local businesses and use them at a 20% off when they open up. We did well. We raised roughly about 30 lakhs in about 2 months for a lot of SMBs that we were working with. And I think while that was happening, we were building Thrive. So I think June is when we launched in Mumbai, in Bandra. There's this Japanese restaurant called Izumi. It's one of our favorites, the three of us. So we went and we told him we're going to run your ordering. He was nice enough to kind of pilot the product. And that's when we started, right? So that's how Thrive was sort of born. The idea was to give food ordering a SaaS-y sort of structure because SaaS was our background. So what we said was we won't get you customers, but we'll do everything else where we'll plug riders, we'll plug payments, and we'll give you the infrastructure for menu, etc. Right? Because getting customers is expensive, and we don't have money, but we have the tech and the know-how, right? So that's how that. So food ordering for everyone's reference has four verticals. The marketplace, which is for customers, the infrastructure, which is your billing and menu management, etc., logistics, and payments. We felt we can solve the remaining three by making tie-ups with different players in the ecosystem, and we let the restaurants sort of deal with their own customers. So that's how Thrive was born. We started with one restaurant in June, about 100 in Jan. By August, we had 6,000, and the product is only sort of scaling now, right? But the idea was to kind of not be a full-fledged consumer company, to build a sort of SaaS product. Biggest learning, I think Hiloni mentioned this earlier also, biggest learning was how do we solve and not take payments from SMBs, right? To take anything between 100 rupees to even 50,000 rupees from a restaurant on a monthly basis involves sending an invoice, a follow-up, a phone call, etc. Right? So the idea was we'll cut it at source. We decided we'll create our own payment gateway. We'll take our commission. We'll take responsibility for logistics, payment gateway. We will take everything at source, and we will pay the restaurateur the balance, right? Completely eliminating invoicing and payment collection, right? And that was imperative for us in terms of our learnings with the first product, right? So even today, if somebody tells me that, let me pay postpaid, right? Let it go through my terminal. We drop that client, right? It doesn't work, according to me, in India, especially in be it anyone, small brands, big brands, right? I mean, it just doesn't work. So that's been a big win for us. But that's more or less Thrive. A lot of challenges, to be honest. Lots of challenges. I think I started getting white hair in the last 6 months. Logistics is a battle, right? In terms of how it works, how ordering works. So we're still sort of fine tuning how we can sort of make the product better and improve the customer experience, right? But still early days. Yeah, I'll jump on more as the call goes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the most exciting part out of this conversation was scaling from 1 to 6,000 in probably a span of 1.5 years. So definitely the SaaS knowledge kind of looks like a real-time implementation. You have been able to do that. But looking at like India ecosystem, at least from what I know, there are a lot of providers when it comes to CRM, logistics, delivery, right from your VFast, Zomato to all the smaller players in the B2B space as well. So how are you able to beat that and kind of, like you said, MVP, how are you able to create that for your brand?
No, spot on, right? So I think the way we look at it, you have your two big boys, right? Which is Zomato, Swiggy, which are completely consumer focused, and they're evolving, right, in terms of their value add, how they function. Then there are different infrastructure players, right? Like in terms of logistics, there's the Dunzo, Shadowfax, VFast, Page, Rapido. The list goes on, right? Every state has a list of partners available, right? So what we felt was we'll create an open platform and we will integrate with all the players that are in this space in terms of logistics, in terms of payments. So right now we've got, you can pay via Cred, via Google Pay, via Phone Pay, every wallet. We're tying up with different banks, etc. So the idea is to be that sort of marketplace in the middle. Something what probably if I have to give you an equivalent, a Shopify is doing for e-commerce globally, right? The idea is to build that for the Indian F&B ecosystem and tie up with different partners. So the more partners you tie up with, I think you open yourself to more clients, more services, etc. Right? So that's the route that we're taking. There are, of course, competitors in our space as well, but that's a good thing. I always see it as a good thing. There's more education, etc., and a lot of pros around that.
Yeah. And if I understand correctly, like if you were building out your own payment gateway, you get the money first and then you give the money to the restaurant, like maybe end of the month or whatever. That way you're capitalizing on that pool of capital also, right? Like you have money upfront. So that's a great idea. And so how many, what's the team right now? Like what's the team size?
So just to kind of add to that, right? The thing is, Zomato, Swiggy give you money in 15 days, and the idea was we want to make a serious dent, right? So we said that for the first 1.5 year, we'll give it to you in 2 days, right? Cash flow is a big sort of seller with small businesses, right? So the idea is we're not capitalizing on it today. But it will happen over time, right? But that's more about that.
So, I mean, having worked with partners in the past, generally as an entrepreneur, you end up doing like almost everything in the business. But since you have 3 partners, I mean, you all are 3 of you, how do you manage the segregation of duty and how do you make sure there's no overlap and there is accountability for each of you?
Yeah, no, that was a great problem, right? I still remember when coming back to the accelerator session, right? First thing they asked us is need designation, need role, need responsibility, need monthly targets, and get the hell out of each other's lives, right? If you want to sort of grow, because I think till that point there was a lot of cross-functional stuff happening, and that's when we sort of felt with Thrive, right? From day one, we've been so clear in terms of how we are with each other professionally as well, right? We have our weekly scrums where we will go through what is it that we've achieved, our blockers, etc. But that's about it, right? There is no other interference. And of course, if you need help, you ask. Good thing is, I think, having known the two of them for a while, there is zero ego in terms of how we function. And we're always sort of looking after each other, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's critical. Coming to functions, currently with Thrive, right? We felt Krishi is one of my partners. He looks at product. With Thrive, we were very clear we want a product CEO because it's a self-serve platform. So Krishi is CEO, I am COO. I look at sales, operations, support, everything on the outside, right? Karan is CMO. He's detailed. He was also for a while in-house designer, UX, UI, content, blogs, the entire list, right? But now he's building a team. So we've been very clear in terms of what we're looking at. We have an additional VP of engineering, given that Krishi is looking at finances as well, right? Given as CEO. So that's when we felt we need someone senior to come in on technology. But that's the sort of structure, very well divided. I think that's imperative. I think we realized that very late. It sounds easier than it is, but non-interference and targets need to be set for founders. So we use this methodology called OKRs, Objective Key Results, internally at Thrive. So we have, while we have it for all teams, we have something called founder KRs as well, that don't sort of fit in different buckets in terms of what we want to achieve. Because otherwise, founder time is sometimes very vague, right? Sometimes you're networking, you're doing PR, or God only knows what, right? But somehow the day just goes by. So we've sort of set up founder KRs, and that's really helped. We do this on a quarter-on-quarter basis, but this has really helped us, OKRs. In the entire team, right? It gives them a lot of structure when we're doing our weekly meetings, irrespective of everything, right? The needle needs to move on the objective that we've set, right? Plain and simple. So that's how we're going about it right now.
Have you read the book Measure What Matters?
Yes. I was one of the first. So I have a close friend, Vidya. She runs this company called Fitbots. It's an OKR SaaS tool. Yeah. So she was with me in Bangalore, and she sort of is. So they pivoted start of COVID. Said forget India. Now they're based out of Singapore, so they're working with brands there. But she sort of recommended the book. And pushed us to kind of adopt OKRs from day one, right? So we got a lot of gyan from her. She was nice enough herself to do a lot of sessions with my entire team to kind of educate them on how to even write a OKR, right? How to write an objective. It's so vague sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of those things, but yeah.
I mean, my husband's in Amazon and they have this really, and initially I found it very weird, but they have a concept like before they start every meeting, they have at least a 20-minute time block where every person who's presenting in the meeting documents everything. And the entire team has to read that before they jump into the meeting, be it a KR, like a performance review meeting or an internal team meeting. And that's how they kind of have a structure to the documentation and how do you kind of write what you want to present or what are your goals. And kind of an eye-opener, initially felt weird, but then I realized, I mean, it's so important, right? Being founders, we probably most of the time don't have time to go through things prior to the meeting. And you kind of jump into it and then look through things. So I think another thing you can probably look at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think meetings sort of get, they sort of, I think people lose interest and a lot of times objectives are lost, right? And now especially we're remote. So some of these best practices, I think it's 100% go, right? I mean, I think we're also learning in terms of how to get everyone's efficiency up, right? So no, completely agree with you.
That's good. But you did mention about like pivoting to different geographies and being an India-based startup. How easy is it to kind of explore into other markets, and what are like some of the best practices to do that?
Yeah, not easy. I think very difficult. There's no information out there unless you're part of a community. If I were to be very honest, Thrive is going to be a consumer product. That's how I see it. Currently, we're taking small steps towards it. Hopefully, in the next 3-4 months, it will look like even bigger product. And that's the reason why we focused on India. My advice and experience says that any SaaS product should not focus on India, should not. There's a bigger market out there, simply should not. The idea is it's simple, right? You rather earn $1 than a rupee, right? In terms of what you build. There is enough talent present in India. I think products are not a challenge. Ecosystems outside of India are relatively more open in terms of integrations, in terms of building that infrastructure. Biggest challenge and I would say consciousness that comes to people, right, is how do I go about compliance, legality, and a lot of those things, right? There's so much uncertainty. So I think if you feel you have a product for the global market, since there is no playbook per se, you get in touch with someone who has executed that playbook. In the last 3 years, I have seen it successfully with at least 50 to 60 products. WhatFix was the most recent one right now that I noticed. Chennai is the new sort of SaaS hub right now. Hyderabad is coming along, but there's a lot going on, right? So there's a lot of information to kind of get out there. There's this community called SaaS Bhumi that does events twice a year where they come and showcase products that make in India sell globally. Opeka is an investor in that industry, but there is a lot of references that you can get, right? But advice would be to kind of figure it out through speaking, through researching, but to build for outside, right, of India at least. This is a really good time to kind of do that.
So Dhruv, switching gears a bit, I think you brought this up before we started the recording, right? You interviewed people as part of your company, right? So what were some of the things that you observed that like students who are now coming into the workforce, they should be implementing, or what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think to be honest, we were looking for two things, right? When we went out there. I think first was a sort of a culture fit in terms of understanding who that person is. And second is a skill fit, right? For me, it's always been culture over skill, especially for junior roles, right? Of course, if you're getting in somebody at a more senior level, they need to come with a very specific skill set. But going back to campus and like sort of early hires, right? What I noticed was students were not as well researched in terms of what is happening in the ecosystem. Knowledge that's really available is more around what they experience as consumers and not as what goes on behind the scenes. So the idea was, personally, I felt there was a big mismatch in terms of expectation and understanding of how different industries work. I felt there is today a plethora of information available when you sort of interview, right? So what's happening now is a lot of the companies that are growing thick and fast, at least technology, have very focused products and focused industries. So the idea is, I think while a fresher may want to be a generalist to kind of kickstart their career, I feel it may kind of do someone a lot of benefit if they learn or read about particular industries, develop an opinion, are able to have a conversation, think about problem, it's a great start, right? I mean, none of us knew anything about industries when we got there, right? But I think times are changing. There's so much information out there. So I think that was one thing that we felt he was missing in terms of the acumen of a lot of students that we worked with, spoke to. So I think that was one. I think second, in terms of in terms of what is expected, right? I think now I'm coming back to startups. I'm not talking about larger organizations, right? At the end of the day, there are a few things you have to be prepared for, right? One is you will get into the action much sooner than you expect, right? Because if a startup is hiring, that means they are overloaded with work, right? Not that they have a little bit of work and they're bringing you on for a 1 month training, and I would expect for that person to go sort of. This happened with me. I shouldn't be saying this, but I have had a support joinee last week, and she was just like, can we put some brakes on? I was like, no, right? I mean, there's a reason I'm getting you before the festive time, because there are that many orders, and figure it out, right? And keep learning on the go, right? So I think in terms of being open to the fact that you will be working a lot, you will be working across teams, being open to being a generalist, not being specific about role responsibility. There's so much, right? I mean, I think just being open, asking questions, lesser about admin and more about product. I think that's a big uptick, right? When you're interviewing someone. Most of the times, I'm ready to pay that person more than what their requirement is, but the conversations are so raw, and they're sort of self-negotiating, right? Which is really not required. So I think we still have a long way to go in terms of when we see at least our grad students, right? Some of them I feel like 10 standard old kids, very raw, right? So I feel there's a big gap. So our preference is always to get someone with, if you're going for a fresher, I mean, fresher in our vocab is at least 18 months experience. Somebody's been through that cycle of training them a little bit, right? But yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah.
Like it's a selfish question again, right? But you worked in EY, right? Before switching and starting launching your own product. So 2 questions. First, were you working on the product while having a corporate job, or you were just ideating while doing it? And second, what made you switch? Like, were you done with the corporate world and wanted to do something on your own? Like, what was your thought process?
Yeah, I think first we didn't launch the product, I think, till we were completely out, right? We were only ideating, very early stage. Even at that age, right? I think a idea was to be conscious of the fact that if I'm working somewhere, 100% of my attention and attention should be on my current projects, right? So I think we were conscious of that fact. The idea is, I think till our last day, right? I mean, there was no sort of me taking days off or anything like that. Everything that we were doing was in the nights or on weekends, right? I mean, so we were quite clear. In fact, and I saw that in my then co-founder as well, right? And that's when we felt that professionalism is also very important, right? And that was a sign. So that was that. In terms of what was done, to be very honest, without sounding sort of demeaning to my role at that point, I felt I could take on larger problems. And at larger organizations, I felt there is a certain structure or a growth path. I felt I wanted to kind of take a few more steps than my liking. And that was probably one of the biggest reasons that I felt that it's it's time for me to kind of put myself out there and start something, right? So I think growth was the only challenge, and I wouldn't say growth in terms of only money or things like that. I think the idea was to kind of take on more responsibility, bigger projects, and do more in those early years, right? So that was the prime reason. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, we can move on to the top threes. So we'll start with which are your top three favorite books, and which is that one book that you've gifted the most?
So one is I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, so I think those books took a lot of time over the years, right? In the middle, I phased out, but I think I started again. So I think that's one. I love sort of fictional books with a slight sort of twist on whether it being something around a message or an autobiography. The Alchemist is a book that I love. I have picked on a lot in terms of my journey, in terms of how to deal with hardships. Deep down, I'm a Musk fan. So I think his autobiography is something that I have read. In fact, I had even gifted it to a bunch of team members that I wanted to sort of think out of the box. But I think those are the others. The classics, I think, growing up, Harry Potter fan. So I think those books never get old. But I think lately, I think I've switched more to documentaries, podcasts. I think there's just so much information out there, which reminds me I need to sort of go back and sort of go back to reading, right? So I think that's been a missing link in terms of where I am. Yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
So talking about documentaries, top three documentaries.
So I think top. I am personally I'm a safari enthusiast. So I have seen all David Attenborough documentaries, from Our Planet to Wildlife to Night on Earth. I think those are really high up. Every time we get a break, so I think one thing that we do is go somewhere. I think India is a brilliant wildlife sort of a lot of different sort of parks, right? So I think that's something that we picked on. But yeah, I think whenever I get time, any wildlife or animal documentaries are sort of right up there. Other than that, I think sport. I think Michael Jordan, MJ's documentary was really good. Although I'm not a Manchester City fan, but I think the All or Nothing that on I still remember. I think that documentary was really good.
It's Arsenal this year, right?
I know. I'm not talking more about it. The description is anyway not very enticing in terms of the documentary. It's about what went wrong. So, but yeah, so I think sport and anything to do with wildlife, those are sort of up there.
And then podcasts, any podcast or YouTube channel recommendations?
Yes, I think listening to a lot of Tim Ferriss. I think that's one over the years. Outside of that, I think recently I've been obsessed with Clubhouse, partaking in a lot of conversations there as well. Discovered a lot of micro entrepreneurs talking about their experiences. I think that's been very enlightening, to be honest, and something that I'm spending, I think, every alternate day about 20 minutes listening, at least, or while eating dinner, etc. There are a lot of great channels there, I think, on SaaS, on entrepreneurship, that I've been following. I had the pleasure of attending, speaking at a bunch as well. We're building a really strong community out there. So I think that's that. Yeah. So I think other than that, completely sort of parallel, but Insight Timer and Calm podcasts in the night are my go-to to kind of peace out, just listening to or meditating. So I think those are really good, where they talk about small things in life, right? Recently, I heard a podcast on. It was on water, and I'm not kidding. In the night, it was just so peaceful. They spoke about everything in and around it. So yeah, that's been something that I've been listening to a lot lately.
Yeah, Insight Timer is a brilliant app. It's free as well, so I use it more than Headspace and Calm for sure.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your top 3 productivity tools that you use the most?
Interesting. So I think one is for work. I think Zapier. I create a Zap for even the smallest thing, from my calendar to every drive sheet. I have a personal Zapier account outside of the company account that I use for smaller things. I think second is small things, but Google keeps me going. I think in terms of tasks. I love the UI in terms of reminders, etc. Very clean. Outside of that, currently I'm experimenting with a new tool on email called SendGrid to kind of automate my conversations with different businesses or people in our network. It's more conversational. So I think that's something. The other one is there's a new tool called Video Form, which allows me to run video-based forms. So I think that's helping me, where I have to have lesser in-person conversations and it's sort of increasing productivity. But yeah, I think that's productivity. To be honest, I think COVID has been the biggest accelerator, because I work from home and I save a lot of time on travel and in general, right? Even commuting or meeting with clients. So it sounds cliche, but I think Zoom and Google Meet have been such big productivity tools. It's an understatement. So yeah, I think that's.
I mean, it accelerated the India ecosystem to adopt this so fast. And I remember, like, probably 2 years back, it was a mandate to go meet a client before closing a deal, which is no more a requirement. It's such a good feeling. I mean, traveling in Bombay, anybody who's been there knows how annoying it is to just go meet a client to get a contract signed.
Yeah, I think for everything, right? Loom has been such a big deal for us, where we can record demos over tools, right? From HelloSign to digital contracts. I think for everything there is a tool. Just avoids meeting in person, right? So I think that's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just concluding the podcast, it has been a very, very insightful conversation, right from anybody who's a first-time entrepreneur to mistakes that they should be avoiding in the very beginning, to probably anybody who's looking at creating a SaaS product and expanding locally or globally. All your insights have been spot on. And I think it's going to be an extremely valuable content for a lot of people out there. Thank you so much for spending this time and being on the show with us.
Yes, thank you for having me, and super initiative, guys. Keep it up. Thank you so much.
Thanks.